The first thing she said to me wasn't, "Thank you for your work." It wasn't even, "This is hard." It was, "Don't dirty my hands." Yeah, that. My name is Elowyn Price. I am 42 years old. I was sitting in a glass conference room that always smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee, the kind of room where people pretend everything is clean. Clarissa Vaughn sat across from me. CEO, perfect hair, perfect posture. Like she ironed herself every morning. HR was already there. Folder open. They didn't waste time. Organizational restructuring, Clarissa said. Flat, like she was reading the weather. They slid the severance agreement toward me. 12 weeks of pay. Health benefits through the end of the quarter. A broad non-disparagement clause that basically said I couldn't say anything negative about the company, its leadership, or its operations, anything that might harm reputation. I read it twice. I swear my hands didn't even shake. I'm going to activate my meeting notes app. I said, just to log transition instructions. Clarissa waved her hand. Fine. It records voice to text automatically. Timestamps, sends a copy to my archive. I use it all the time for compliance meetings. Nothing secret about it. She kept talking about transition plans like I was already gone. A week ago, I'd filed a sterilization compliance report. Nothing dramatic, just data, just numbers that didn't add up. But we had an investor roadshow coming up, and suddenly I was restructuring. I signed the acknowledgement that I received the offer. Not the agreement itself. That part matters. Then I stood up. I don't even know why. Habit, I guess. I extended my hand. Clarissa looked at it. Actually looked at it like it was something sticky. Don't dirty my hands. HR shifted in her chair. For a second, I felt heat rise up my neck. I wanted to say something smart, something sharp. Instead, I said, you just made a mistake. I don't know why I said that. It just came out. HR jumped in. You'll need to sign the full agreement within 24 hours. Otherwise, the terms may change. May change. That's how they phrase threats. While she was talking, my phone buzzed once in my pocket. Archive sync complete. If this was just restructuring, why the rush? Why the pressure? When I stepped out of that room, I already knew this wasn't about my job. It was about something I'd written down. And I wasn't done reading. I didn't go home after the meeting. I went back to my office, or what was still technically my office, for a few more hours. I pulled my original contract out of the bottom drawer. I always kept a paper copy. People laugh at that, until they don't. 6 years ago. They recruited me right after the company got slapped with an FDA warning letter, production delays, sterilization variants, nothing catastrophic, but enough to scare investors. Back then, it wasn't Clarissa who interviewed me. It was 2 board members and the general counsel. One of them had said, "We need someone who can speak up without fear." I'd replied, then put it in writing. That's how Section 7.3 happened. It gave me the right to report safety concerns internally, direct access to the audit committee, protection from retaliation. And this part mattered. No post-employment agreement could override those rights. I remember the general counsel sliding the red-lined draft across the table. "This is unusual," he said. "So is getting an FDA warning." I answered. They approved it. Now I read the severance agreement again. The non-disparagement clause was broad. No carve-out for whistleblowing. No mention of statutory protections. Just blanket silence. That's not standard language for a compliance hire. Not in Minneapolis. Not in medical devices. I called Daniel, the in-house lawyer I used to work with on audit reviews. "They're pushing a clean NDA," he asked. "Clean for them." I said, "Not for me." He went quiet for a second. If 7.3 is still in force, that's not just HR paperwork. That's governance. Governance. That word carries weight in a boardroom. I hadn't even left the parking lot when the email came through. Subject line, severance agreement. Action required. I opened it sitting in my car, hand still on the steering wheel. You are required to execute the agreement within 24 hours. Failure to execute may impact terms. May impact terms. That's corporate for sign. Or we make this worse. There was a second line. System access has been suspended pending transition. I laughed. Not because it was funny, just because it was obvious. I replied before I could talk myself out of it. I'm requesting 7 days to review with independent counsel. 5 minutes later, HR responded, the offer is tied to the current fiscal window. No extensions. 24 hours is the standard window. Standard. For who I typed again. Please confirm in writing that no extension will be granted and that severance terms may change if I don't sign within 24 hours. She answered in under 2 minutes. Confirmed. There it was. Clean. Documented. 2 hours later, I drove back to the building to finish pulling compliance files I'd been organizing. My badge didn't beep green. It blinked red. Security shrugged. System says inactive. I checked my phone. My company email was gone. My shared drive access revoked. The deadline hadn't expired. I texted Daniel. They locked me out. Before the deadline, he wrote back. Yes, he didn't respond right away. That scared me more than anything. I sat on the concrete step outside the entrance. Wind cutting across the lot. My phone screen reflected my face back at me. I looked tired. Older. I started documenting. Screenshots of the access denial. Timestamps on my email requests. Cloud logs showing file uploads that had been running when they shut me out. I didn't call HR, didn't argue. I just preserved everything. Tell me something. If this was just paperwork, why cut off my access before I even had the chance to say no? The letter arrived by courier the next morning. Thick envelope. Corporate letterhead. No greeting. Termination for cause. Insubordination. I read it twice. Then a third time. They accused me of data exfiltration, claiming my final cloud uploads were an attempt to steal proprietary IP, rather than a legitimate transition of files, and that I refused to cooperate. The letter stated, I opened my laptop. Upload logs still showed active transfers when my access was cut. Email chain showed I had sent credentials to the operations lead. Timestamps didn't lie. I replied in one line. Please confirm date of disciplinary hearing under Section 14.1 of my employment agreement. That section requires documentation. A hearing, an opportunity to respond. No answer. Instead, a second email. This one from corporate legal. Reminder of your continuing confidentiality obligations. Unauthorized disclosure may result in legal action. There it was. Not about transition, not about attitude, about silence. I called Daniel. They escalated. I said, Takasi asked. Yes, he exhaled slowly. That's aggressive. My files were uploading when they locked me out. I know. You think they'll sue me. Only if they think you'll back down. I hung up and stared at the kitchen table. The wood smelled faintly like old coffee. My mortgage payment was due in 3 weeks. My dad's assisted care wasn't cheap. This industry is small. Word spreads fast. I swear. For a second, I considered signing just to make it stop. Then I thought about that sterilization report sitting in their inbox. Daniel called me that afternoon. His voice sounded different, lower, filled with the anxiety of a man caught between his conscience and his paycheck. Legal reviewed everything. He said, and I asked, no performance improvement plan, no misconduct record, no disciplinary hearing. And they revoked your access before the deadline even expired. I know. Section 7.3 is still valid. That's not just standard HR language. That's board-approved governance. So they'll fix it, I asked. I almost hated how hopeful I sounded. They recommended settling under your original severance terms. But Clarissa overrode the recommendation. In writing, I leaned back in my chair. The radiator near the window clicked and hissed. Why, I said. Daniel didn't answer right away. There's an investor presentation in 3 weeks. He finally said, the roadshow is the ghost haunting every corridor of the executive wing. Clarissa needs the sterilization data to look flawless to satisfy the private equity vultures circling the scene. Any red flag in a compliance report, especially one involving batch variances, would trigger a mandatory due diligence deep dive. It would delay the funding round by months. Or worse, slash the company's valuation by half before the first slide is even shown. I let that sit. The silence on the line felt heavy. So this isn't about me. No, it's about optics. She's not just firing you, she's trying to bury the report under the noise of a contentious termination. If she can paint you as a disgruntled employee fired for cause, your report becomes tainted evidence in the eyes of the board. They'll see it as a desperate attempt at revenge, not a legitimate safety concern. And if I challenge it, then it becomes a breach of fiduciary duty. I laughed once. Short, not amused. She was gambling with patient safety and the integrity of the medical devices just to keep an investor deck clean. She wasn't just ironed and perfect. She was hollow. She overrode her own legal department to avoid looking weak, I said, or to avoid looking exposed. There's a massive difference between the two. One is an ego problem. The other is a crime. I stared at the termination letter again. They were betting I wouldn't escalate, that I'd protect my career over my claws, that I was too scared of the industry's blacklist to fight back. They were wrong. I wasn't just a compliance officer. I was the person who knew where the bones were buried because I was the one who refused to dig the graves. I didn't sleep much that night. Around 3 a.m, I opened my laptop and started drafting. Not an angry email, not a social media post, a formal complaint. Wrongful termination, breach of contract, procedural unfair dismissal, retaliation, duress. Each word felt heavy. Each one meant escalation. I called Daniel before I hit submit. If you file, he said, this doesn't stay in HR. That's the point. You understand it triggers board-mandated protocols review. I wrote section 7.3. I know what it triggers. Silence. Are you ready for this? He asked. No, I said honestly, but I'm done pretending this is paperwork. I attached the sterilization compliance report. The same one Clarissa had skimmed and dismissed as timing sensitive. The one that flagged irregular sterilization cycle data across 2 batches. Nothing explosive. Just enough to matter. You sure you want that in there? Daniel asked. If this is retaliation, then context matters. Under company bylaws, any retaliation allegation tied to compliance reporting must be disclosed to the audit committee. That means board visibility. That means oversight. I filled out the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry form carefully. Dates, attachments, timeline. I double-checked the section referencing access revocation before the deadline. My finger hovered over submit for a second. This wasn't just about 12 weeks of severance. It was about whether internal controls rules meant anything when tested. I clicked submit within 20 minutes. I received confirmation of filing. By end of day, the internal portal showed the audit committee had flagged the filing. Audit committee notification went out. It left HR. It left Clarissa's control. The company didn't fold. Of course they didn't. Their attorney opened with, the non-disparagement clause is standard practice across the organization. My lawyer, Marisol, didn't blink. Then you'll have documentation of policy distribution, a pause. It was communicated during restructuring meetings. Corporate counsel said, Marisol leaned forward. Please produce the written policy, the circulation date, and acknowledgement records. Nothing. No attachment, no follow-up email. So they pivoted. The company acknowledges the recording, but we contend that the context of restructuring was a collective business decision, not a targeted dismissal. I almost laughed. Instead, I slid my laptop across the table. Cloud timestamps. I said, automatic archive logs, external sync at the moment of recording. Marisol added, and here's the email from Human Resources approving the activation of the note application at the start of the meeting. Corporate counsel scanned it. His jaw tightened just slightly. Clarissa didn't look at me. She looked at him. He tried again. Even so. Internal restructuring decisions fall under executive discretion. Marisol didn't miss a beat. Executive discretion doesn't eliminate contractual procedure. That shifted the room. They weren't arguing about tone anymore. They were arguing about rules. And the rules were written down. Counsel shuffled papers, searching for something that wasn't there. For the first time, their confidence thinned. The hearing room smelled faintly like old carpet and coffee that had sat too long on a burner. No drama. just folding tables and a digital recorder blinking red. Clarissa sat 3 seats down from me, navy suit. Perfect posture. She didn't look at me once. The administrative judge flipped through the file. Ms. Price, she said, you were initially informed your role was eliminated due to restructuring, yes. She turned to the company's attorney. And later terminated for cause, yes, Your Honor. Why did the reason change? The attorney cleared his throat. Subsequent information revealed insubordination. The judge didn't look convinced. What information? He shuffled papers. Failure to complete transition. I leaned forward. My access was revoked before the deadline expired. The judge glanced at my exhibits. I see timestamps. She turned to the company again. Why was access revoked before the 24-hour deadline silence? Clarissa's attorney tried to recover. Access suspension is standard during sensitive transitions. The judge raised an eyebrow. Even before the agreement window closes. No one answered. She flipped to another section. Was a disciplinary hearing conducted under Section 14.1? The attorney hesitated. It was not deemed necessary. Procedure is not optional. The judge said, calm, not loud, just final. Marisol slid the transcript forward. May we read the relevant excerpt? The judge nodded. Marisol read aloud. Steady your role is eliminated. No mention of misconduct. No reference to insubordination. The judge looked at Clarissa for the first time. At what point did the alleged misconduct occur? Clarissa's jaw tightened. After she resisted transition, I spoke before I could stop myself. I requested time to review the agreement. The judge held up her hand, and that request is documented. She leaned back slightly. This appears less like misconduct and more like escalation following a refusal to sign. The CFO shifted in his seat. I could hear the faint hum of the air vent above us. Then the judge said the sentence that changed the temperature in the room. The employer failed to follow its own governance framework. Not just contract, board-mandated protocols. That's bigger. Boards listen when that word shows up in a ruling. Clarissa finally looked at me. Not angry, just calculating. The judge closed the folder. I will issue a written decision. I walked out of that room shaking, but not from fear. The administrative law judge's ruling arrived via the e-filing portal, 12 pages of clinical, devastating prose. No drama, just 12 pages and a digital signature. I opened it at my kitchen table. The screen light made everything look harsher than it was. Marisol called as I was scrolling. You're going to want to read page 7 slowly. She said. I did. Severance agreement invalid due to unreasonable review period. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She continued. Termination for a cause procedurally defective? That's clean. I said, it gets cleaner. Retaliation claim credible. There it was. Not proven beyond all doubt. Not poetic. Just credible. Award granted. 12 weeks severance. 8 weeks additional damages. Legal fees. Continuation of benefits. Short. Clinical. Final. Marisol's voice softened. You won. I stared at the line that mattered most. Employer disregarded established governance protections. Fiduciary duty. That word again. They'll pay? I asked. They have 14 days. I closed my laptop slowly. It wasn't about the money anymore. 12 weeks. 8 more. That helps. Sure. Mortgage doesn't care about principal. But this ruling isn't private. Public record. Searchable. Downloadable. The company wired the money on day 10. 12 weeks of severance. 8 weeks additional damages. Legal fees. Benefits continuation. Clean. Transactional. Marisol called. They complied. Of course they did. I said, they don't want enforcement proceedings. The ruling didn't disappear. It got picked up by a compliance journal out of Chicago. Small publication. But in medical devices, small journals get read by very serious people. 3 weeks later, Daniel texted me. Audit committee opened an independent review of what I asked. Internal controls override. Retaliation exposure. Safety escalation protocol. Then another message a month after that. D&O insurance premiums increased. Carrier cited procedural failure. That's the kind of sentence that makes boards nervous. At the next quarterly investor call, someone asked about recent governance findings. I wasn't on the call. I didn't need to be. 6 months later, Clarissa Vaughn stepped down to pursue other opportunities. No apology, no dramatic exit, just corporate language. Daniel called again. It's done. He said, no, I told him. It's recorded. I started at a new firm across the river. Smaller team. Less ego in the room. On my first day, one of the board members came to meet me in person. We read the ruling. He said, we prefer people who follow procedure. He held out his hand. I looked at it for half a second. Old reflex. Then I shook it. Firm. No hesitation. I won't lie. There were nights I almost signed that agreement just to keep things quiet. Mortgage. My dad's care. Reputation. It would have been easier. But here's what I learned. And you can take it or leave it. Write things down. Insist on clauses. Keep records. Don't rely on tone or goodwill when power shifts. Paper survives longer than pride. If you ever find yourself in a room where someone tells you not to dirty their hands, remember, this dignity doesn't make noise. It documents. She believed power lived in a gesture, but it lived in a clause she chose to ignore. And honestly, if you've ever had to choose between comfort and principle, I'd like to hear how you handled it.